My name is Bianca Russo. I'm 41 years old, and I used to believe that if you built your life carefully enough, nothing could truly collapse without warning. Not overnight, not without signs. I work as a logistics manager for a regional distribution company in Ohio. My days are structured down to the minute. I wake up at 5:30, I'm in the office by 7 o'clock, and I'm home by 6 o'clock, unless something breaks somewhere in the system that needs fixing. I don't improvise. I don't guess. I plan, I document, I verify. Chaos doesn't survive long around me. Or at least, that's what I believed. My husband, Caleb Russo, is 38, charismatic in a way that doesn't feel forced. He doesn't demand attention, but people still orbit him anyway. He works in marketing for a mid-sized firm. He understands presentation, how things look, how things feel, how people perceive you. For most of our marriage, I thought that made us balanced. I built the structure. He brought the energy. We had been married for 11 years. No children by choice. A shared mortgage on a modest 3-bedroom house just outside the city. Dual income, decent savings, annual vacations. The kind of life that looks stable from the outside. The kind people assume is safe because it appears organized. On paper, nothing was wrong. 6 months ago, everything shifted. I was diagnosed with stage 2 lymphoma. Treatable, according to my oncologist. Aggressive, but manageable. We started chemotherapy within 3 weeks. I approached it the same way I approach operational crises at work. I gathered information. I confirmed timelines. I built a plan. I showed Caleb the survival rates. I laid out the treatment schedule on the kitchen whiteboard. I explained what each phase would look like, what the side effects might be, how we could manage them. I expected concern, maybe fear. What I got instead was something colder. "This isn't how I pictured my late 30s, he said. Not quietly, not in shock, just irritated. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, staring at the whiteboard like it had personally offended him. I finally felt like we were entering our prime, he added. Everything was lining up. I remember blinking at him, trying to recalibrate, trying to understand if I had missed something in translation. "It's treatable," I said carefully. "The prognosis is good. My oncologist is optimistic." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. "Hospitals make me anxious," he said. "I'm not built to be someone's nurse, Bianca." At the time, I told myself he was processing badly. People react differently to fear. That was the explanation I chose. It didn't hold. Over the next few weeks, something in him shifted. Subtly at first, then unmistakably. He became distant, short-tempered. Small things started bothering him. The smell of antiseptic on my clothes after appointments. The way I needed help getting to an infusion when the nausea hit too hard for me to focus. The fact that I still worked remotely between treatments instead of resting properly, as if I was somehow performing illness incorrectly. Once, I asked him to drive me to the clinic because I felt too dizzy to sit behind the wheel. He sighed like I had asked him for something unreasonable. "I had plans tonight," he said. "I just need a ride," I replied. "It's 2 hours." He rubbed his face, visibly annoyed, before grabbing his keys. The entire drive, he kept checking his phone at red lights. He didn't come inside with me. Said he'd wait in the car. I watched him through the glass doors of the clinic lobby, head tilted down, thumb scrolling, completely disconnected from the reality sitting 10 feet away from him. From me. Then the comments started. Not to me at first. To other people. Mutual friends mentioned casually that Caleb said I was milking the diagnosis for sympathy, that I was leaning into it too much. Even though I was still working, still managing deadlines, still trying to keep everything functional, I didn't confront him about it immediately. I observed. That's what I do when something doesn't make sense. I gather data. And then his past walked back into our present. Her name was Elena. They had dated in their 20s years before I met him. I had heard about her in fragments over time, usually framed as nostalgia. Something intense, something unfinished, something that had burned out rather than faded. She resurfaced through mutual friends after hearing about my diagnosis. At first, it sounded harmless. "She just texted to check in," Caleb said one evening, casual, like it didn't matter. I nodded. Of course she did. People check in when they hear news like that. But then the text didn't stop. Then the calls started. Then the late nights. "I just need air," he told me one evening, already halfway out the door. "Watching you be sick all the time, it's suffocating." I stood in the hallway, one hand braced against the wall, because the room had started to tilt slightly. "I'm not choosing this," I said quietly. "I know," he replied, already pulling on his jacket, "but I didn't choose it either." That was the first time I realized something fundamental had broken. Not cracked, broken. A week later, he came home late, past midnight. No message, no explanation. I was on the couch, half asleep, the nausea medication wearing off in waves. He walked past me without stopping. As he did, I caught the scent. Cologne, not his. Sharper, artificial, like something sprayed too heavily in a department store. I didn't say anything. I just watched him disappear into the guest room we had turned into his office. The next night, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. No buildup, no hesitation. My cancer diagnosis made me realize something, he said. I felt my stomach tighten instinctively. What? I asked. He held my gaze. Life is too short to stay in something you're not truly passionate about. There it was. Clean, direct, final. Not fear, not confusion. A conclusion. I didn't respond immediately. I just looked at him, trying to reconcile the man sitting in front of me with the one I had built 11 years of life around. Are you saying you want to leave? I asked. I'm saying I need to think about my life, he replied. Not just this. He gestured vaguely toward me, toward the house, toward everything. The next morning, he acted like he had done me a favor, made coffee, moved around the kitchen like nothing had shifted. We should be practical about this, he said. Practical. That word again. The one he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while doing something cruel. I asked him a simple question. When did you start talking to Elena again? He sighed like I had asked him to file taxes. You're always trying to turn everything into a spreadsheet, he said. I'm asking for a timeline, I replied evenly. I'm not cheating, he snapped. I'm reconnecting. And if I ask more questions? He looked at me, expression sharpening. Then you'll be the reason I leave, he said. Not the cancer. That was the moment everything clicked into place. Not the diagnosis, not the late nights. That sentence, the precision of it, the way he shifted responsibility so cleanly it almost sounded logical. I nodded slowly, not because I agreed, but because I understood. After that morning, I stopped asking questions out loud. Not because I didn't have them, because I already knew Caleb had learned how to turn every question into an accusation. So I watched. I watched the way his phone stayed face down on the table now. I watched how he started leaving the room to answer calls. I watched him change his passwords on things we had shared for years without mentioning it, then act surprised when I noticed. Chemo made my body unreliable, but it did not make me stupid. Tuesdays were infusion days. By Wednesday mornings, I usually felt like someone had drained the blood out of me and replaced it with sand. My bones ached. Food tasted metallic. Sometimes I would stand in front of the bathroom mirror and not recognize the woman staring back. My hair began falling out in strands first, then clumps. One morning, I found a handful of it stuck to my wet fingers in the shower. I stood there under the hot water, holding it, unable to move. Later that day, I shaved my head before the rest of it could betray me slowly. When Caleb saw me, he stopped in the hallway. For half a second, I thought grief crossed his face. Then his mouth tightened. He looked away too quickly. You could have warned me, he said. I touched the scarf in my hand. Warned you? It's just sudden. I almost laughed. Sudden. As if the cancer had been rude enough not to make him comfortable first. That evening, he dressed up for the first time in weeks. Dark shirt, fitted jacket, the watch I had bought him for our anniversary. I was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of plain rice because it was the only thing I could keep down. Where are you going? I asked. He didn't look at me. Out. With who? He turned then, irritated before the conversation even began. Elena, he said, since you need it spelled out. The spoon in my hand felt cold. I placed it down carefully. You're going on a date with your ex while your wife is in chemotherapy. His jaw clenched. It's not a date. Then what is it? We're talking. At dinner, dressed like that. He let out a harsh breath. This is exactly what I mean. Everything has to be labeled with you. Defined, controlled. No, I said quietly. Some things already have names. You just don't like the one that fits. His eyes hardened. Elena understands me in a way you don't anymore. There it was again. Not just betrayal. Replacement. She makes me feel alive, he continued. I don't feel like I'm constantly trapped in medical charts and fatigue and fear. I stared at him. I'm the one with cancer, Caleb. I know that. No, I don't think you do. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I didn't sign up to spend my late 30s watching my wife deteriorate. The sentence landed so cleanly it almost didn't hurt at first. Deteriorate, not recover, not fight. Deteriorate. I swallowed slowly. The prognosis is good, I said. You know that. Statistics don't change what it feels like. I looked at him then. Really looked. The man I had loved for 11 years was standing in our kitchen, using my illness as an inconvenience in his love story with another woman. He left at 6:42 p.m. I remember because I was staring at the microwave clock when the front door closed. He did not come home that night. At 1:08 a.m., my phone lit up. I'm staying at Elena's place. We talked for hours. I need space to think about my life. Not our life. His life. I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down. I did not cry. That surprised me. Maybe my body had already spent too much energy surviving to waste any on begging. Instead, I opened my laptop. I logged into our joint accounts. Mortgage auto draft was fine. Utilities were current. Savings untouched. For now. I transferred half of our liquid savings into a separate account in my name only. Not to punish him. To protect myself. It was marital money, and I was not going to wake up one morning to find that Caleb's passion had emptied our emergency fund. At 2 a.m., I emailed a divorce attorney. Married 11 years, no children, joint house, recent cancer diagnosis, husband staying with ex-girlfriend. No drama, no emotional paragraphs, just facts. Facts were easier to carry than heartbreak. Caleb came home Saturday afternoon like he had returned from a retreat, not from another woman's apartment. He looked rested. That was the first thing I noticed. Rested, almost lighter. I was sitting at the dining table with paperwork spread out in front of me when he walked in. His expression changed instantly. "Are you going to interrogate me?" he asked. "No," I said. "I'm going to ask you one question." He dropped his bag by the wall. "What now? Are you ending this marriage, or are you expecting me to tolerate you dating Elena while I go through chemotherapy?" His face twisted. "You're twisting things." "Am I?" "I'm confused, Bianca. I need space to figure out what I feel." "You slept at her apartment." "I stayed there." "Did you sleep with her?" The silence that followed was louder than anything he could have said. He looked away. "It's complicated." No, it wasn't. People use complicated when the truth is simple and ugly. I stood slowly, one hand on the table because my knees felt weak. "Pack what you need for the week." He blinked. "What?" "Clothes, toiletries, laptop, medication, if you have any here. Nothing financial, nothing legal. You have 2 hours." He laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "You can't kick me out. My name is on this house." "I'm not pretending you don't have legal rights," I said. "I'm telling you that you chose to stay with another woman. You can continue staying there while we sort out the separation properly." His face went red. "You're being petty." "No, I'm being clear." "You're punishing me because you're sick and bitter." I looked at him for a long moment. "I am sick," I said. "But I'm not bitter. I'm lucid." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You don't want to do this. You're emotional." "I've never been less emotional in my life." "You're unstable." "No," I said. "You were counting on me being weak." That stopped him. Only for a second. Then he scoffed and walked past me toward the bedroom. I followed at a distance and pulled his suitcase from the closet. I placed it on the bed. The sound of the wheels hitting the floor made his expression shift. That was when he realized I was not bluffing. He packed angrily, slamming drawers, grabbing clothes in messy handfuls, muttering under his breath about cruelty, about timing, about how no one would understand what I was doing to him. I let him take clothes. I let him take shoes. I let him take his work laptop. When he reached for the folder with our mortgage papers, insurance documents, and bank records, I stepped in front of the drawer. "Those stay." His eyes narrowed. "You're really doing this?" "Yes." He stared at me like I had become someone unfamiliar. Maybe I had. Or maybe he was finally meeting the version of me that existed beneath all the compromise. When he walked out with 2 suitcases, he paused at the door. "You'll regret this when you're alone and sick." I held the edge of the door with one hand. I would rather be alone and sick than married and disrespected. His face flickered. Anger. Shock. Something close to fear. Then he left. The door closed behind him at 4:17 p.m. For several minutes, I stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet. Not peace yet, but space. That evening, I changed the garage code. Then I scheduled a locksmith for Monday morning. I texted Caleb once. "Contact my attorney for further communication." Then I turned off my phone. I sat in my own house, in the silence he had left behind, and for the first time since my diagnosis, the air did not feel like it belonged to someone else. Monday morning, the locksmith arrived at exactly 9 a.m. I had always appreciated punctuality. It meant things were still operating on rules. I showed him my ID, the mortgage statement with my name on it, and explained that my husband had moved out temporarily, and I needed the locks rekeyed. He didn't ask questions that weren't his business. He gave me a quote, I approved it, and he got to work. By 10 a.m., the house was secured. New keys, new boundaries. I placed one of the keys in a sealed envelope with my attorney's name on it and set it aside. This wasn't about trapping Caleb out. It was about making sure he didn't walk back in like nothing had happened. At noon, my phone lit up again. His name. I let it ring. Then again and again. Voicemail notifications followed. The first one was anger. You can't just erase me from my own house, Bianca. The second was panic. What if I need something? This is insane. The third was calmer, controlled. We need to talk about how this looks if we go through with a divorce, especially with your condition. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Not how this feels, how this looks. I responded once. All communication goes through counsel. I've retained representation. That was it. At 3:12 p.m., the camera notification pinged on my phone. Motion detected, front door. I opened the app. Caleb stood on the porch, sunglasses pushed up into his hair, jaw tight. He tried the door handle. Locked. He knocked once. Then harder. Then pounded. I walked to the door and opened it just enough for the chain to hold. He stared at me like I had betrayed him. This is insane, he said. Is it? I asked calmly. Marcus, he caught himself, corrected. Elena thinks you're spiraling. I almost smiled at that. Elena can think whatever she wants from her apartment. His mouth tightened. I'm not living with her. You stayed there for 2 nights. That doesn't mean I moved in. You told me you weren't passionate about our marriage anymore. I said I was confused. No, I said. You said life was too short. He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. You're taking everything to extremes. I'm responding to reality. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're really going to go through chemo and a divorce at the same time? Yes. Something flickered across his face then. Not concern. Calculation. You don't have to do this now, he said. We can pause everything. Focus on your treatment, then figure things out later. There it was. The contingency plan. Keep me in place. Keep options open. I met his eyes. You don't get to test drive your ex-girlfriend and keep me in storage in case it doesn't work out. His expression hardened instantly. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. You're twisting it. No, I said quietly. I'm naming it. Silence stretched between us. Then he shifted again. Softer tone. Slight tilt of the head. The version of him that used to negotiate, persuade, smooth things over. Maybe we both reacted too quickly, he said. Maybe this doesn't have to be permanent. I watched him carefully. You're in a relationship with her, I said. He hesitated, just for a second. Then, it's not that simple. That was answer enough. It is simple, I replied. You just don't like the outcome. His jaw tightened again. You're being cold. I'm being clear. You're acting like this is black and white. It is. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. You've always been like this. Everything has to fit into your neat little categories. And you've always relied on gray areas to avoid accountability. That landed. I saw it in the way his posture stiffened. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he tried one more angle. You're sick, Bianca, he said, quieter now. You're not thinking clearly. I held his gaze. My oncologist disagrees. This isn't about your treatment. It is for me. He shook his head, frustration bleeding through again. I'm trying to make this easier. For who? For both of us. No, I said. You're trying to make it easier for you. That ended it. He stepped back, exhaling sharply, hands on his hips. Fine, he said. If you want to burn everything down. I'm not burning anything down, I interrupted. I'm closing a door you already walked through. His eyes flashed. Elena makes me feel chosen, he said suddenly. Desired, alive. The words hung in the air. I considered them for a moment. Then you should go be alive, I said. No anger, no sarcasm, just truth. Something in his expression shifted then. Not regret, but the absence of control. He had expected resistance, emotion, maybe even desperation. What he got instead was a boundary he couldn't negotiate around. He turned and walked down the steps. The sound of his car door slamming echoed through the house. I stood there for a few seconds after he left, then closed the door gently. The chain slid back into place with a soft metallic click. That afternoon, I met with my attorney again. We drafted a formal separation proposal. 50-50 division of assets after appraisal. House to be sold. Clean break. No dramatics. No references to Elena. We didn't need them. The facts were enough. 2 weeks later, I shaved what little hair had tried to grow back unevenly. Not because it was falling out again. Because I was tired of watching it try. Control what you can control. Caleb's messages slowed after he received the separation draft. The tone shifted. Less emotional. More strategic. He didn't want to sell the house. Said the market wasn't ideal. Said it would be disruptive. Said we should wait until after my treatment. I forwarded everything to my attorney. Asked her to run the numbers. Even after fees, we would both walk away with enough to reset. That was the point. A reset, not a delay. He requested to come by and collect more of his things. I agreed to Saturday at 11 a.m. with my brother present. Not because I thought Caleb would become violent, because I knew he would try to rewrite what had happened. And I wanted a witness to reality. Saturday came. 11 a.m. exactly. He knocked once. When I opened the door, he paused. For a second, I saw it. The reaction. I was thinner, paler. The chemo had carved sharp lines into my face that hadn't been there before. For half a heartbeat, something like guilt flickered across his eyes. Then it was gone. "You look worse," he said. No softness. Just observation. I nodded. "Treatment is working according to the scans." He shrugged. "I hope so." My brother stepped into view behind me, arms crossed, silent. Caleb's posture shifted slightly. Less confident, less comfortable. He moved through the house, collecting books, clothes, small personal items. While he packed, he talked, casually, about Elena, how she had started meditating again, how she was pushing him to think bigger, how she was proud of him for choosing himself. Choosing himself. I listened without responding. At the doorway, as he lifted the last box, I asked one question. "Are you in a relationship with her?" He didn't hesitate this time. Yes. No apology. No hesitation. Just yes. I nodded once. Okay. That clarity was cleaner than anything else he had given me. He shifted the box in his hands, then looked at me. "You disappeared emotionally the moment you got diagnosed," he said. "You became a patient instead of a wife." I held his gaze. I became someone fighting to live. He didn't respond. He walked out. The door closed behind him again. That night, I sat at the kitchen table alone. Same table, same house, different reality. And for the first time, the decision didn't feel heavy. It felt correct. After Caleb left that second time, the house felt quieter in a way that wasn't just about sound. It was the absence of tension. No shifting moods, no unspoken resentment sitting in the corners of rooms, no sense that I had to monitor someone else's emotional temperature while my own body was fighting something much more immediate. Everything became simpler. Not easier, but clearer. I moved through treatment the same way I moved through everything else. Methodically. Appointments, blood work, infusions, recovery days. I tracked side effects the way I tracked supply chain disruptions, patterns, triggers, responses, adjustments. Some days were manageable. Some days weren't. There were mornings I woke up and couldn't get out of bed without sitting there for 10 minutes first, waiting for my body to agree to cooperate. There were nights where the nausea came in waves so strong it felt like my bones were hollowing out from the inside. But there was no confusion anymore. No second layer of emotional instability layered on top of physical exhaustion. Caleb still existed, just not in my space. His messages came less frequently after the separation draft. And when they did, they sounded different. Less about feelings, more about outcomes. He didn't want to sell the house. That became his primary focus. "It doesn't make sense to list right now," he wrote in one email forwarded through his attorney. "Market conditions aren't ideal." Another message. "It would be disruptive for both of us, especially given Bianca's medical situation." That one almost made me smile. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. He was repositioning. Not as the man who left his wife during chemotherapy, but as the one trying to be reasonable about logistics, about timing, about optics. I let my attorney handle all responses. Numbers don't lie. Even after realtor fees, we would both walk away with enough to reset cleanly. That was the goal. No shared assets, no lingering ties, no reason to circle back. A few weeks into the process, Caleb requested to come by again, to collect more of his things. I agreed. Same conditions. Saturday, 11 a.m., my brother present. When he walked in this time, something about him felt slightly off, less certain, not dramatic, just different. He moved through the house more quietly. Less commentary, less casual references to Elena. He packed what he needed without trying to fill the silence, until he couldn't anymore. "She's been talking about starting a consulting firm," he said suddenly, not looking at me. "Elena, she's got ideas." I didn't respond. He kept going anyway. "Things are just different with her." I leaned against the counter, steadying myself as a wave of fatigue rolled through. "Different doesn't mean better," I said. He paused, then shrugged. "We'll see. We'll see." As if everything was still an open experiment. As if I was still a variable he could return to if the results didn't meet expectations. That was when I realized something important. He still thought this was reversible. Not emotionally, logistically. That if the timing aligned, if his situation shifted, if things with Elena didn't stabilize, there would still be a version of this life waiting for him. I said nothing, because explaining it wouldn't change it. He had built his understanding of me on years of compromise. He He hadn't updated that model yet. That afternoon, after he left, I sat at the dining table with my laptop open. Work emails, treatment schedules, legal documents, and one more tab. An internal job posting. Same company. Different region. 3 states away. Smaller team. Lower operational complexity. Comparable salary. I stared at it for a long time. Then I applied. Not impulsively. Not emotionally. Deliberately. I didn't tell Caleb. I didn't tell anyone, actually. There was no strategic advantage in sharing that information early. Treatment ended in early spring. 5 cycles, each one slightly harder than the last. My final scan was scheduled on a Tuesday morning. I remember sitting in the waiting room, hands folded in my lap, staring at the same framed print on the wall I had looked at for months. Abstract shapes, muted colors, something meant to be calming. My oncologist walked in with a tablet in his hand. He smiled. That was the first sign. "Bianca," he said, "we're not seeing any detectable active cancer." The words didn't land all at once. They settled, slowly, carefully. "Remission?" I asked. He nodded. With cautious optimism, he added, "We'll continue monitoring, but this is a very good response." Cautious optimism. Doctor language for hope with boundaries. I nodded once. "Thank you." I didn't call Caleb. I didn't text him. By that point, my recovery was not something he had earned access to. The divorce process moved forward. Mediation, documentation, appraisals. The house came in slightly higher than expected. He pushed again. "I can't afford to buy you out right now," he said during one session. "We should delay the sale." My attorney slid the numbers across the table. "This is a fair market evaluation," she said. "Any delay would need mutual agreement." He looked at me, not angry, not emotional, just assessing. "Bianca," he said, "this is a lot of upheaval at once." I met his gaze. It already happened. He leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly. During another session, he shifted tactics again. "This timing. It makes me look bad," he said carefully. "Leaving during your diagnosis, moving forward with divorce, it could affect me professionally." There it was. Not regret. Reputation. "We're filing under irreconcilable differences," my attorney said. "There's no narrative attached." He glanced at me. "I just don't want this to follow me." I held his gaze. Then you shouldn't have created it." Silence. Short. Clean. He didn't bring it up again. The house went on the market. Within weeks, it sold. He cried. Not in front of me. But I saw it during the final walkthrough. Standing in the kitchen. Looking at the countertops he had insisted on redesigning. The backyard he had talked about hosting parties in. "I thought this would be permanent," he said quietly. I didn't respond. Because permanence had never been the issue. Respect was. I moved into a short-term rental closer to the hospital for follow-ups. Small place, minimal furniture, no history attached to the walls. Quiet. 3 months after he moved out, he called me directly. Not through attorneys, not scheduled. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity is a habit I haven't fully unlearned. "Hi," he said when I picked up. His voice sounded different, less certain. "How are you?" I asked. There was a pause. "Things with Elena aren't what I expected." I leaned back in the chair. "I see. It's not as simple as I thought it would be," he continued. "Passion doesn't automatically translate." "No, it doesn't." I didn't say it out loud. "She thinks I'm still too tied to you," he added. "Legally, financially." "That's accurate," I said. Another pause. "Have you started seeing anyone?" he asked. I looked at the window. "At the empty street outside." "That's not relevant." Silence stretched. Then he said it. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." There it was. The assumption. The foundation of every decision he had made. "I thought you'd fight harder," he added. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "You left because you thought I was deteriorating," I said calmly. "You're calling because I didn't." He didn't respond. Not immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. "Is there any chance, after everything's finalized, that we could—" "No." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't hesitate. "Just no." The line went silent, then disconnected. I sat there for a few seconds after the call ended. Then I closed my phone. That night, I signed the final transfer paperwork with my company. New state. New office. New life. I didn't tell him. Not yet. The day the divorce was finalized, it didn't feel dramatic. No surge of emotion. No sense of victory. Just that completion. The judge reviewed the documents, asked a few procedural questions, and signed off without hesitation. 11 years of marriage reduced to a file number, a signature, and a clean division of assets. No children, no alimony, no lingering obligations. Efficient. Final. By the time I stepped out of the courthouse, the air felt the same. That surprised me. I had expected something to shift, some kind of internal marker that would separate before from after. Instead, it felt like something that had already ended a long time ago had simply been documented. Caleb texted me that afternoon. It's officially over. I stared at the message for a moment before responding. Yes. 5 minutes later, another message came through. I didn't think it would feel this empty. I leaned back against the wall, reading that line again. Empty. That was the word he chose. After everything. After leaving. After choosing someone else because life was too short. Now it was empty. I typed a response. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Then finally, I sent one. That's something you'll have to process on your own. He called immediately after. I let it ring. Then go to voicemail. Another message followed. Can we at least not hate each other? I stared at that one longer than I expected. Hate requires energy. And I had already decided where mine was going. I responded once more. I don't hate you. I'm done. Then I opened my settings. Blocked his number. Blocked his email. Removed his access from every shared account that still existed in the background. Photos. Cloud storage. Old subscriptions. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Systematically. Like closing out a file that no longer needed to stay open. For a moment, I sat there in the quiet after the block. It felt different than before. Before, there had always been the possibility of interruption. Now there was a boundary. Intentional. Solid. About 20 minutes later, my brother texted, Claire just called me. Says you blocked her. She sounds panicked. I looked at the message, then typed back. That's accurate. He replied with one word. Finally. That night, I packed the last of my things. The transfer date wasn't for another 2 weeks, but I had already signed the lease in the new state. A smaller city. Slower pace. Different hospital network for follow-ups. No forwarding address shared. No announcement. Just movement. I left on a Tuesday morning. Everything I owned fit into a small moving truck and the back of my car. No dramatic goodbye. No last look at the house. That version of my life had already closed. The new place was quiet. 2 bedrooms. Minimal furniture. A window that overlooked a river trail where people walked in the mornings without urgency. No shared memories attached to the walls. I updated my address with work. With the bank. With my medical providers. That was it. 2 weeks after I relocated, my brother called. She showed up at the house, he said. I leaned against the kitchen counter. The old one? Yeah, new owners are already moved in. She thought you were still there. I closed my eyes briefly. She didn't know? No. What happened? They told her you'd relocated? Out of state. I exhaled slowly. And? She called me after. Asked if I knew where you went. Do you? No, he said. Which, for the record, is still true. I almost smiled. A few days later, an email came through from an unfamiliar address. It landed in my spam folder. I didn't open it, but I read the preview line. I didn't realize you would actually disappear. Disappear. From his perspective, that's what it looked like. From mine, it was something else entirely. I didn't respond. Life settled into something new. Follow-up appointments every few months. Physical therapy to rebuild strength. Work that required focus, but not exhaustion. Routine. Not the same as before. Better. Cleaner. 6 months into remission, my hair started growing back thicker than before. One morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror and paused. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see a patient. I saw myself. I started dating again slowly. Coffee first. Then conversations. No urgency. No need to prove anything. Just presence. About a year after the divorce, a mutual friend reached out. Casual conversation. Nothing pointed. But somewhere in the middle of it, he mentioned Caleb. They broke up, he said. Him and Elena. I stirred my coffee. I see. Apparently passion isn't as fun when it has to deal with rent and real life, he added with a small laugh. I didn't respond to that. He's different now, the friend continued. Quieter. Said he regrets how things happened when you were sick. I nodded once. Okay. 2 weeks after that, I received a letter. Handwritten. Forwarded from my old address by the new owners. I recognized his handwriting immediately. I opened it. No excuses. No deflection. Just guess acknowledgement. He wrote that fear had driven him more than honesty. That watching my diagnosis made him panic about losing the version of life he had imagined. That running toward Elena felt easier than facing mortality. He admitted he thought I would fight harder. That he believed my illness would make me dependent. That when he heard I was in remission and had moved away, he realized I hadn't disappeared. I had chosen. The letter ended with one line. I'm sorry I underestimated you. I read it once, then folded it carefully, placed it back in the envelope, and set it in a drawer, not as a keepsake, As a record, I didn't respond. People might expect that part to feel satisfying. Vindication. Closure. It didn't. It felt distant, like reading about someone else's life. Cancer forced me to confront something I couldn't control. Time. Mortality. The fragility of everything I had built. Caleb forced me to confront something I could control. Respect. When he said life was too short to stay with someone he wasn't passionate about, he wasn't wrong. He just misunderstood what that meant. Life is short. That's exactly why I refused to spend it convincing someone to stay.